All right, so once again, my name is Victor Elias. We're talking about quality's conceptual system, fundamental elements of the creative process. Using this presentation on my own, not the DoD or its components. The ideas in this presentation can be found in my book, The Quest for Ascendant Quality. So our outline for today's talk is basically your incentive for listening to this talk. We're going to introduce the quality mindset. I'm going to talk a little bit about how I came about discovering these relationships in quality's conceptual system. We're going to talk about some concepts from the last century that perhaps could be improved upon for this century. And as a bottom line up front, I'm going to do a presentation of the process enrichment philosophy via video. Hope you can enjoy it. I've heard the sound might be a bit jittery, but it's also available online and on YouTube if you are interested. And we're going to define quality, risk, and strategy, and if time permits, look at a few applications and cases. So Arthur Koestler, famous author, philosopher, wrote about the quality mindset. He wrote that obviously creative acts are things that we do in our mind. So what we're thinking about when we innovate and we create things is that we displace attention to something not previously understood, or it could be understood in a new context or a new way of using something. So a lot of things that once you understand the principles and what the change is, it becomes obvious that those ideas fit together. Like the glue 3M company came up with for Post-it notes. It was not really sticky, but it was tacky, so it worked really good for Post-it notes. The Slinky was a toy for kids in the 60s. You know, people working on lathes had made scrap metal that was in the shape of springs, and that could have been used as a spring, but this fellow that developed Slinky understood that it could be used as a toy. And then one fellow was walking in the weeds and some burrs stuck to his socks, and he discovered Velcro. So a lot of these things that we take for granted now were, you know, discoveries that came along. So in talking about the quality mindset, what I wanted to do was help you understand that quality, strategy, risk, and human aspiration are not independent things. They seem to interrelate. So if you have a strategy, for example, say you're Tom Hanks and you're going to go meet Meg Ryan at the Empire State Building on Valentine's Day, and you have to get there on time. You have to decide how you're going to get there: plane, train, automobile. I guess from Seattle, you have to fly at least part of the way. But each of those different strategies for getting to the Empire State Building have their own set of risks and require certain technology. So you have an aspiration to get there, you have different technologies for getting there, and you have risks with each technology. If you take a subway versus a taxi, there may be a taxi strike or there may be a garbage strike. You can't even walk. So all of those things involved in the decision which strategy to follow help you make that decision. And it's like that for almost every decision that we make. There's a balance between strategy and risk that we make. So one thing that you discover when you realize that human aspirations, strategy, quality, and risk are interrelated in this way, then you have to redefine the terminology for strategy, quality, and risk so that all of the terms interrelate. So when you define quality, quality is related to strategy, risk is related to quality and strategy, strategy is related to quality and risk. So as we'll see in this presentation, I'll go through those definitions pretty repetitively so that we get a good feel for them. And there's gravity working for you. All right, so the goal here is to learn about a system of conceptual tools to help you devise ways to make all of your creative efforts strategically effective. So that means we're working, even in this presentation, from an incentive to attain a good quality mindset. We're working towards that goal with a strategy. We're presenting a system of conceptual tools that will work together to help you understand that what you're doing for customers is you're helping them attain some incentive. Think Pavlov's dog. He heard the bell and he came for food. His incentive was the food. So almost every product and service is made for some customer or user's benefit. And if you understand that incentive, it's more powerful than even asking a customer what they want. Because like you could walk into an appliance store and say, I want a refrigerator or a washing machine, but you don't really have the producer's insight to what goes into those machines. So if the producer knows what you want a refrigerator with an ice maker, or has to be certain dimensions. All of those things have to be ascertained from what the customer's incentive is, what they're using it for. And so that incentive can help you work around bad requirements, or when there's a lapse of the quality of the specification or requirements that the customer made. And then, you know, sometimes you can't even depend on the customer saying that they're satisfied, but you could have made a better product for them with equal effort. So understanding quality and balancing that with their strategy and what the risks of use are is helpful in all forms of commerce. Everything we do, understanding quality is an asset. So I'll have to read the fine print here. This was one of the items that came up in a defense acquisition course that I took. When things go wrong on defense programs, the problems are often traceable to the failure to fully grasp the fundamental needs of the user. So that's what I was alluding to. You have to understand the incentives that the user is going to want to attain through use of your products and services. And when you know that, you have a direct line to producing a product and making decisions on which features are going to be effective in helping the customer attain that incentive. So what I'm talking about is quite different from Michael Porter's definition of strategy. His is a good definition of strategy, but it was so good that it dominated industry, and nobody really thinks of anyone but Michael Porter when they think of strategy. But really, as I was saying, with Tom Hanks and Meg Ryan going to the Empire State Building, we're exercising strategy all the time. Strategy for getting food, strategy for going to the mall, strategy for being safe in the workplace. So what we are looking at is a more fundamental definition of strategy in this presentation. The definition of quality that Phil Crosby came up with, quality has to be defined as conformance to requirements, was a great definition of quality for the last century because people wanted things to be developed to blueprint requirements. So if you're manufacturing guns, bullets, things in the millions, like for World War II, it made sense to have some hard requirements. You stick to those, and this definition of quality works very well. But you have to realize that it's not truly a definition of quality. For example, how would you know you had good requirements? Would the requirement conform to requirements? It's not useful in helping people understand what quality is. So this was one of the inspirations for taking that step to a more fundamental level to do research to find out how we could define quality in a useful way so that people can not resort only on brainstorming, but they can have a system of things to think about so that they can create better products. Another definition from the last century that persists is that risks are potential future events or conditions. As we'll see at the end of this presentation, risks always begin with a bad strategy. So if I was going to the Empire State Building and I was going to swim around Manhattan Island to get there, that would be a bad strategy in the first, rather than taking the train or a taxi or something more efficient. So there are trade-offs, and that goes into the decision of which strategy to pursue. But risks always start with the initiation of a bad strategy. And the reason I emphasize that is that you want to try to discover all of the things that are bad about your strategy in the first place, rather than waiting on future events, because a lot of things are built in to your strategy. Once you start swimming, you can't decide you want to take a taxi, unless it's a water taxi.
Hey, Victor, if I could interrupt you for a second and just to ask everyone to make sure they have their microphone muted. There's some ambient noise. Thank you.
Thanks, Julie. Right, a couple more legacy concepts I wanted to go through pretty quickly. Some people think that improving processes improve products and services. We'll talk about this a little bit, but the only process that can improve products and services is a quality improvement process. When you're improving processes, you're doing things internally for your organization, and that's very necessary. It enhances efficiency, it enhances consistency, it makes it a good place to work, makes people speak the same language. But if your customers are not getting anything different, then you haven't really improved the product and service. So a lot of process improvement, the process improvement premise, for example, that they use in CMMI and ISO 9001, it is based on an indirect improvement of product and service quality by reducing variation and keeping products consistent. That's all really great, but what we're talking about here is going to be directly improving the quality so that it meets the strategic needs, the incentives that the customer is trying to attain. Another item 5 is reducing defects improves quality. Reducing defects only reduces defects. It doesn't improve quality unless what you're doing is shipping defective products to your customers. So if your company doesn't make defective products and sell them as defective products, customers are not getting anything different. So reducing defects doesn't improve quality. That's a really tough concept for people that are experienced in the quality industry to get. But I've tried to make it pretty clear. Hopefully the rest of the presentation will get you in that new mindset where we can understand that a little better. And we talked a little bit about the customer getting a washing machine or a dryer or something, product that they don't really know the innards of. And they could say it's excellent, but if you have insight to what their actual needs are, you'll know what type of machine to steer them to if you're in the business of selling those types of products. People think they're going to hate courses on strategy, quality, and risk because of these concepts of quality, strategy, and risk that are not really applicable to them. For example, the business strategy is a great idea, but it applies to the 1% of the 1% of business leaders who can actually implement that strategy. But what we're talking about here is strategy that everybody uses all the time, every day. So what we need is a new science for quality improvement. So for the practice of quality improvement to rise to the level of the science, it should follow from a philosophy, models, definitions, relationships, as other sciences do. I guess that little trip to Manhattan was a lot like the thought experiment of Einstein in the elevator. When we talk about strategy and the strategy following from incentives in marketplace, and that creates a motive, which is expressed as an intention carried out through behaviors using resources. That sort of stuff follows from criminology. And lastly, in psychology, if you remember Maslow's hierarchy of needs, it was a great way to express this sequence of what I call themes of performance in my definition of quality. But he called it physiological needs, safety needs, social belonging, esteem, self-actualization. There was a progression there. So people went from one level of need to a higher level of need. And as they became more mature individuals, they tended to focus more on specific types of need. It's similar with quality. You go from bare minimum acceptable to more efficacious, more sustainable, more optimal, more easy for you to get along with, and more easy for other people to get along with. So we'll talk about that a bit. So now to get into the fundamentals, one of the things, I don't know if the English is really good here, but anyway, wherever life is found on the quest for ascendant quality. So, you know, thinking about any creature on Earth, they're always looking to improve their quality of life. And, you know, we're better able to do that because we can introduce technology into our strategies, but most creatures can't really do that. So that's why we can get to the moon and do some pretty sophisticated things. If people were not able to if they were not on the quest for ascendant quality, you would have what Star Trek used to call an arrested culture. In this one episode, I don't know if you guys remember it, but anyway, Spock said that his tricorder couldn't register any progress in this civilization, which was really a phony civilization that this alien society created just to fool visitors. Anyway, that's the concept of arrested culture. So it's not only that individuals, you know, if you look over the last 100 years or 1,000 years, how humans have progressed, we're always on the quest for ascendant quality. In I guess it was early 1960s, 61, 62, I had the date here, 62, President Kennedy laid out the strategic incentive. It became a shared vision, and people developed what I call CoAscendance. They worked together on this really great project to create Voyage to the Moon, put land 2 men there. And unfortunately, one only circled the moon and had to come back. So here, without any further ado, is the process enrichment philosophy. So as I mentioned before, the most common elementary and perhaps defining property of living beings is that we each possess a fundamental need to be on the quest for ascendant quality. And we talked a little bit about the process of balancing quality and risk as a process common to all life and a creational strategy. So consider, for example, if you were trying to identify the properties of or the functionality of a car for racing versus a car for vacationing. Once you know what the strategy is for the customer, that tells you what features are more amenable to that pursuit. So that's why I say look at the incentive of the customer. Are they trying to win a race? They're going to need a fast car. If they're going to go on vacation, they need a comfortable car that's going to hold all of their luggage. So that's why there's that interrelationship that shows trade-offs. So looking at definitions of aspiration, strategy, quality, and risk independently doesn't give you the full picture. A picture I really like of the Paladin Howitzer that I work on for the Army is always great to see. The words up top, Watts Humphrey said, quality must be the organization's highest priority. So I'm fortunate that the organization I work for tries to make products and services that last. They're not looking to put planned obsolescence into their products. They're not trying to cut costs in materials. They're not trying to get you to buy printer ink at a cost more than blood. They're trying to just make a really good product that lasts. So it's kind of unique, and I understand that other organizations have to experiment with planned obsolescence and things like that to optimize revenue. But if we're looking purely at quality, we have to pursue it from the perspective that we want to make an appropriate product that is in service of the customers' or users' needs. So what is quality? The definition of quality is the ability of performance in each theme of performance to enact a strategy. So as I mentioned with Maslow's hierarchy of needs, this is a very similar progression. Like conformance to requirements is at the acceptance level. So you start there, you build a better product that's more efficacious. Think of efficacy like a drug that works faster, like an aspirin that stops your headache in 2 minutes rather than 5. Sustainment is like maintenance. How do you keep a product in its acceptable, efficacious condition for the time you're using it? And then once you have acceptable, efficacious, sustainable performance, how do you optimize that so it really is better for the end user? And then process enrichment is a little harder to understand. It's working with the people in the system. So the producer has to be happy with the processes they're using to develop something. The customer has to be happy with using the product and services in the way that they're using them. There's a lot of human factors involved in that. And the organization has to get proper revenue, and it has to have the right procedures for developing something. So it's working with the people in the system. And world-class is once you've got all of that other good stuff going well, can you do it everywhere you need to do it equally well? Or can you expand to a broader market for your product and service? Like a pen is a good example of a product that is acceptable, it's efficacious, it's sustainable. You can replace the ink cartridge. It's optimal if it has the right sharpness, 0.5 millimeter tip, that sort of thing. If it's comfortable in your hand, and you could use it everywhere you need to use it. Of course, you can't use it if you're taking a math test. You would rather have a pencil for that. So this is a more useful look into quality's 6 themes of performance. This, I hope, is the takeaway really from this presentation. If you can think of the quality of anything, an organization, a pen, a process, in these comprehensive set of themes of performance, then you could have a good understanding of anything, the quality of anything. So this is what I mean by a more useful definition of quality. And it's not brainstorming. So if somebody comes up to you and wants you to describe the quality of a pen, you could do what I did. You can give them a lot of details that you might not think or that you might have taken for granted. So this helps you communicate a little bit better. And I'll take us through a couple of examples just to see how that works. We said earlier that process improvement is more of an internal improvement than quality improvement, which is something that the customer will get in a product or service. For example, in the acceptance theme, an affordable new feature that customers want is added. Compare that to a process improvement. A process now creates fewer defects. So fewer defects means more profit for the organization, more productivity, less wasted time. So that's great for the organization, but the quality improvement with a new feature, something that the customer is really going to want. Efficacy, more effective technologies provided, better miles per gallon, faster acting pain medication. A process improvement would be transferring the customer call center to an English-speaking country with lower labor costs. Sustainment for a product. Product is built with materials that last longer. Process improvement, longer lasting lubricant. So once again, all of these things are internal to an organization. I'm not going to go through the rest because there's more to it. So I wanted to talk more about quality of 6 themes of performance. If you look at how the Wright brothers developed their aircraft, they started with the first Wright Flyer, and at the acceptance level, everybody recognizes the Wright Flyer as the first heavier than air powered aircraft to fly successfully. And that was their claim to fame. Most people don't care about the other stuff because planes evolve quite a bit from there. But at the acceptance level, you're able to fly. If you can't make circles, you don't really have an effective aircraft. So once they realized they could fly, which was something nobody had done before, really, they improved their product by making it more efficacious. So quality progresses like that. And then I skip sustainment. So, okay, it has to be able to land without crashing. That was the third flyer that they made, was able to do that. Then, of course, safe landings and world-class performance, the design of the aircraft became a foundation for future design. So quality improvement usually occurs progressively through each theme of performance, and it's motivated by strategic incentives. So flying becoming a commercial means of transportation required them to develop and evolve. So one of the other things to know about quality is there a standard for quality? So you could say quality is very poor or quality is great, but really quality excellence stands alone as what the customer is ready, willing, and able to pay for, and what organization is willing to produce at a reasonable level of profit. So quality excellence is the absence of the risk of poor performance in each theme of performance for a valued strategy. So it's that level of quality excellence is a sweet spot where you don't have a risk of poor performance in enacting your strategy. Like if you have a paper cup that's been soaked for too long, it's going to have a risk of poor performance. If it's a plastic cup or a glass cup, it's going to last and do well. So like we were talking about for the trip to the Empire State Building, it's just a matter of choosing the right features to make a product have less risk. And then it attains that level of quality excellence, which is a standard against that's driven by what the strategy for use of the product is. This, of course, is a different way of looking at quality excellence. The Declaration of Independence had what Lincoln called our maxim for a free society. Martin Luther King called it our creed. But I thought what Lincoln said was really great as far as a standard of quality excellence being something that attracts people towards it. And the picture you see here is from 2001: A Space Odyssey, the obelisk, and he is pulling quality and the themes of performance towards ascendant quality. We'll get to that in a little bit, but so the direction of improvement here is towards the left, and I'm going to show you a blueprint of how that is really used for communication. So salient charting is what I call it. It's a technique for visualizing strategy, quality, and risk simultaneously. So there are a lot of features that terminology derived from military strategy. Decisive points are a critical part of the battlefront where an advance or loss in quality could be decisive on the outcome of a competitive battle. So if you could imagine this battlefront, which is a line drawn through the decisive points, as your battlefront for a product or service you're offering out in the marketplace. And you're measuring how good it is on this scoring scale. You can put a battlefront of two different products and services up like this and visualize where one is better than the other. For example, is one more efficacious than another, or are they the same but they're better in a different theme of performance? So a careful accounting of that will help you decide which product or service to acquire, or if you're producing a product or service and you realize that a competitive product is better in one of the themes of performance, well, there's your focus for improvement, introducing technology or something to improve your competitiveness. So the progression of product and service quality goes something like this, as we saw with the Wright flyers, that they went from flyer 1, 2, and 3. You have current performance, which shows actual in the blue line and quality excellence in the green line. There's quite a bit of ground to make up to transform to quality excellence. So they build and integrate competency. Usually, you would build and integrate a competency from the bottom up. You would make your product more acceptable, more efficacious, more sustainable. And then you would worry about the higher levels of themes of performance, optimization, process enrichment, world-class performance. And then ultimately you improve the competency to the highest standard, quality excellence. So where do you go from there once you've achieved quality excellence in a product or service? You'll want to build and integrate innovations. So as I said before, any deviation from quality excellence is a risk of poor performance. So now you are deviating to take advantage of an opportunity. So you are taking an innovator's risk to create a product for the market that they may or may not adopt. So there's a risk there. But if you're successful, you transform the concept of quality excellence to your new product or service, and hopefully, all things being equal, you're supposed to gain more market share because you created better value. All right, let me take a few seconds to go through risk. Let's see. So that gap between actual performance quality and performance quality excellence is necessary improvement. So when you use the SEI charting technique, and you can readily recognize the gap and what you have to do, and organizationally, it's kind of motivating. So competition is never a contest of technologies alone, but competition is always a contest among different strategies, which encompass the broader spectrum of necessary performance. That's performance in each theme of performance. So any deviation from quality excellence bears a risk of poor performance, as I was explaining a little bit earlier. So the definition of risk is an influence affecting strategy caused by an incentive or condition that inhibits transformation to quality excellence. So really there are two ways you can get a risk. They're either incentivized risk, like you're trying to make a cheaper product and service. It's like planned obsolescence or something like that. Or you're trying to create a better product and service where you've gambled on trying to create better value. The other way is a condition. Perhaps there's an unavoidable condition that inhibits transformation to quality excellence. So like Count Dracula, quality has an eternal life cycle. You can't, once you've created a product or service with significant risk, that risk goes along to the customer and it creates problems for the customer. Until that product is in the garbage, there's always a risk of poor performance with it. All right, so I'm going to stop there and open up for questions.
Early on, Vic, you mentioned that those of us who have spent some time in the quality sphere have a hard time with the statement that fewer defects does not equal higher quality. And so know that in the software business, every software system delivered is defective. And so I'm wondering if you could comment if there's a different dimension to quality that we should be focusing on, given the nature of the software business.
I think the better perspective to put on defects is that they are a measure of how finished your product is. So it's a measure of completion of your product, much rather than quality. Now, there are some products that are, by their nature, very defective, and in that case, you would consider that a quality measure. So it's kind of a interesting type of concept, but I like to think of quality as something that the customer gets. Like if the customer is paying you for software that puts your name into fields on a computer screen, if it does that well, that's fine. If the product has vulnerabilities to attack and that sort of thing, hackers and that sort of thing, that's not a measure of the quality of the product, unless the product was intended to be an environment where there were vulnerabilities coming from hackers, that sort of thing. But just in the general sense, and in the most applicable cases, quality defects would look like a measure of how finished your product is.
Okay.
It's a little difficult to get, but it seems to be seems to follow from the philosophy.
Vic,
Yeah.
wouldn't defects at a minimum be a failure on the acceptance dimension of the quality? So it
Yes.
could be that your definition of quality is more all-encompassing than the one that we've been using as a quality community. We've just been focusing on that first tier of your hierarchy, whereas you're inviting us to look at a much broader interpretation of quality.
That's a great way to put it, I think. I think we all inherently do that. Indirectly, we do that. We look at all of these things, but we take for granted that there are these 6 themes of performance that need to be satisfied. And the danger in looking at just conformance to requirements is that you don't touch these little things that could really help your customer and could really make the difference between a good product and a great product. The other thing is that with software especially, you can have a requirement and satisfy it in a multitude of different ways, and you want to have some other mechanism of identifying what better quality is for the customer. So if you've met the quality requirement at the acceptance level, you can look at the process enrichment level. How easy is it for the customer to use? How interactive is it? All of those human factors come into play. So I think giving people a mindset where it's no longer just about conformance to requirements, but their creativity is open to looking at other aspects of performance, other things.
All right, so Victor, thank you, great job. There was a lot of complimentary things. Thanks for the presentation, great job. So thank you so much for your time, we really appreciate it.